Hello, my lovely friend. Welcome to your channel. I'm back with another exciting and scary story. Are you ready? Go bring your favorite snack, and let's get started. Tonight's story is not for the faint of heart. It's a tale of shadows, whispers in the dark, and something watching from just beyond the veil of reality. So, turn off the lights, sit back, and prepare yourself. Because once you hear this story, you might never sleep the same way again. I grew up in a small town nestled in the hills of eastern Tennessee, not far from an old, abandoned ironworks that was rumored to be haunted. One time, my middle school friends and I made our way up there, daring each other to step inside, but never quite mustering the courage to get any closer. When I told my mom about it, she insisted we stay away, claiming that it was dangerous, not haunted. I thought her warning was proof of something supernatural, but she dismissed it as mere nonsense, emphasizing the risks for curious kids like us. Our town had its own local haunt as well, a grand, dilapidated mansion about a mile outside of town. I only ever saw it when driving with my dad, but every time we passed, I wondered if ghosts roamed its broken halls. The place looked like it had once been a grand estate with 3 floors, a second-story balcony, and a long gravel driveway lined with trees. To my young eyes, it was a mansion, though now it was boarded up and in ruins. The rumors surrounding the mansion were about a terrible event that had transpired there, a murder, according to some, and that the spirits of those murdered were trapped in the house, unable to move on. My dad, however, dismissed it as a tall tale and said I was too young to understand the real story. He promised to tell me when I was older. Years later, when we were both much older, I finally asked him about the mansion. Here's what he told me. The mansion had once belonged to the Lawson family, among the wealthiest in all of Tennessee. They amassed their fortune through ironworks and land investments. When the family's wealth grew, so did their holdings. The Lawson Ironworks, under the leadership of Richard Lawson around the turn of the century, controlled much of the iron production in the region. Richard had the mansion built as a symbol of the family's power and influence. Richard Lawson was known as a shrewd businessman, but his choice of heir turned out to be a tragic mistake, not just for the Lawson Ironworks, but for the entire family. Richard's eldest son, Thomas Lawson, was chosen to succeed him. Thomas inherited his father's business acumen and, in the early 1930s, began aggressively expanding the company's operations. He opened several new ironworks and acquired land at a rapid pace. For a while, everything seemed prosperous, and Thomas earned a reputation as a successful and generous businessman. However, Thomas's expansion was not without its consequences. To fund his projects, he had to bypass many regulations and acquire land from those in desperate situations. One such landowner, a local man named Elijah, sold Thomas his property at a heavily reduced price, which became a crucial detail later. Thomas's expansion, initially successful, began to falter. One day, he called a meeting with his top executives and shocked them with the announcement that all operations would cease at the end of the work week, and the company would be dissolved immediately. This decision threw the company into turmoil. Despite the generous severance packages that cushioned the blow for employees and board members, everyone was left wondering why Thomas would abruptly shut down such a thriving business. The most accepted explanation is that Thomas knew something dire was about to happen that would collapse the company's financial structure. Allegedly, a falling out with a major investor led to a vow that Thomas would never receive financial support again. Rather than risk his employees becoming destitute, Thomas chose to shut down the company and ensure they received adequate compensation. It was a noble yet uncharacteristic move for someone like Thomas Lawson, known for his aggressive business practices. In the days leading up to the company's closure, Thomas began exhibiting strange behavior, neglecting his health, speaking incoherently, and reacting to sounds that no one else could hear. Despite the concerns of those around him, no intervention was made in time. Eventually, Thomas, his wife, and their 2 children vanished from public sight. The town sheriff, investigating their absence, discovered the mansion in a horrific state. The family had been found dead, and the initial reports were that Thomas had murdered them. Rumors spread that Thomas, driven by his deteriorating mental state, had killed his family to spare them from the poverty he anticipated. But there's another, more chilling version of events. The land Thomas had bought from Elijah was home to an ancient Native American burial site. Elijah had sold the land under the condition that the site would remain undisturbed. Yet Thomas, driven by profit, ordered the destruction of the burial site to access the iron seam beneath it. The most unsettling details of the case came from the coroner's report. Thomas had not only killed his family, but had arranged their bodies in the trees along the mansion's driveway, mimicking the traditional Native American burial practices. It seemed Thomas believed he could appease the spirits by following these rites. No one truly knows why Thomas Lawson did what he did. The case remains shrouded in mystery, with unsettling theories abounding. Even those who shy away from the supernatural find it hard to reconcile the horrifying details with a straightforward explanation. I always thought my family was a bit eccentric. Stories of distant relatives who'd vanished without a trace, whispers about strange occurrences. Those were the kind of tales that kept my grandparents' house feeling like a labyrinth of half-remembered nightmares. But I never thought much of it until we moved into the old family estate. It started with subtle things, the way the air would go cold in certain rooms, the odd creaks and groans from the floorboards that seemed too rhythmic to be just the house settling. We'd chalk it up to the age of the place, but there was something off about it all, and then the dreams started. I remember the first one vividly. I was running through the house, but the walls were shifting, like they were alive. I would open doors only to find myself in rooms that weren't there before, filled with shadows that seemed to be waiting for me. I'd wake up gasping, drenched in sweat. The image of the last door I'd tried to open burned into my mind. My brother, Tom, started having the same dreams. We'd compare notes, and it turned out that we were both haunted by the same shifting rooms, the same shadows. It wasn't long before we began to notice other things. Objects moved on their own, sometimes subtle, like a book being slightly out of place, sometimes more pronounced, like a vase crashing to the floor without anyone near it. Our parents were dismissive at first. They said it was just stress, that we were letting our imaginations run wild. But then things began to escalate. We'd hear voices at night, murmurs and whispers that would stop the moment we tried to listen more closely. Once, I heard someone crying in the middle of the night, a heart-wrenching sobbing that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. When I went to check on Tom, he was already awake, pale and shaking. One night, while trying to sleep, I heard footsteps in the hallway. I went out to investigate, only to find nothing but an empty corridor. But as I turned to head back to bed, I saw it, a shadow at the end of the hallway, stretching and contorting as if it were reaching for me. I blinked, and it was gone. I started researching the history of the house, hoping to find some logical explanation for our experiences. What I found was a dark legacy that stretched back generations. The estate had been in our family for over a century, and with each generation, there had been whispers of misfortune and unexplained disappearances. The most chilling part of the research was a family curse, a curse that spoke of an eternal haunting, passed down through the bloodline of the estate's owners. The curse was said to manifest through the house, turning the family's fear into a tangible presence. It preyed on the family members' deepest anxieties, manifesting their nightmares into reality. It was as if the house itself were alive, feeding on our fear, trapping us in a never-ending cycle of dread. Desperate for answers, I confronted my parents. They finally admitted that they had been aware of the curse, but had hoped that moving into the house would break it somehow, as if the new environment might somehow alter the cycle. It was clear now that their plan had failed, and instead of breaking the curse, they had unleashed it in full force. Family was trapped, bound to the house by an ancient and malevolent force. We tried to leave, but every attempt was met with inexplicable barriers, locked doors, impassable roads, and an ever-tightening grip that kept us bound to the estate. As the days turned into weeks, we became prisoners of our own home. Each room seemed to shift more violently, and the shadows grew bolder. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, like a chorus of torment that demanded we acknowledge the curse's power. It was as if the house were actively feeding on our fear, growing stronger and more hostile with each passing day. I'm writing this now, hoping that someone will read it and understand. I don't know if there's an escape from this nightmare. All I know is that the house has become our prison, and we are its unwilling occupants, caught in the web of a curse that stretches back further than we could Eve have imagined. The only thing we can do now is wait, and hope that someone, someday, might find a way to break the curse and free us from this endless torment. It started with a family heirloom, a delicate locket with intricate filigree that had been passed down through generations. My grandmother had always told me it was cursed, but I thought it was just an old woman's superstitious tale meant to spice up family history. When Grandma died, the locket came to me. I was a teenager, eager to dismiss the legend as mere folklore. I wore the locket every day, its cool metal a constant touch against my skin. I never imagined it would bring more than the occasional odd look from friends who thought it looked old-fashioned. It began subtly. I'd see fleeting shadows in the corners of my vision, disappearances of objects, and unsettling whispers that I could never quite place. I brushed these off as stress or my imagination running wild. But then the real horrors began. The first major incident happened when my little brother, Lucas, went missing for hours. He'd been playing outside, but when I went to check on him, He was nowhere to be found. We searched the neighborhood frantically. When we finally found him, he was standing in the middle of a field, staring blankly at the sky. He couldn't remember how he'd gotten there, or why he'd been gone so long. He was unharmed, but shaken. From that moment on, things only got worse. The house became a battleground of inexplicable phenomena. Doors would slam shut with no wind to push them, and the lights would flicker in a way that seemed almost intentional. At night, we'd hear disembodied voices calling out our names, always just out of reach. The worst part was the dreams. They were always the same, dark, oppressive, and filled with a sense of impending doom. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, the locket around my neck growing colder and heavier. Lucas began having the same dreams. He'd wake up screaming, convinced someone or something was trying to drag him into the darkness. My parents tried to downplay it, attributing it to stress or overactive imaginations. But as the days went by, their denial crumbled. My mother started having vivid hallucinations, seeing shadowy figures moving through the house. My father became withdrawn, obsessed with trying to find a rational explanation for the supernatural events. One night, I was awoken by a loud crash downstairs. When I went to investigate, I found the locket lying on the floor, its chain broken. The air was icy, and the house was eerily silent. I picked up the locket, and as I held it, a vision flashed before my eyes. A horrifying scene from the past. I saw my great-great-grandmother clutching the locket as she was dragged away by shadowy figures. Her face was twisted in terror as she tried to escape, but the shadows pulled her into an abyss. The vision ended abruptly, leaving me shaken and confused. Desperate for answers, I scoured old family records and discovered a chilling truth. The curse on the locket was real. It had been created to bind a malevolent spirit to our bloodline, a spirit that would torment each generation until it was finally freed. The locket was meant to keep the spirit contained, but it had become weakened over time, allowing the spirit to exert its influence more freely. Realizing that the locket was the key to breaking the curse, I knew I had to destroy it. But the spirit wasn't going to let go easily. As soon as I made the decision, the house erupted in chaos. Shadows surged through the rooms, and a cold, malevolent force seemed to suffocate the air. With my family's help, I managed to take the locket to the old family cemetery, where our ancestors were buried. Under the dim light of the moon, I pried open the locket, and with trembling hands, threw it into the ancient well, where the family legends said the spirit had been imprisoned long ago. The moment the locket hit the water, the ground trembled, and an unearthly scream echoed through the night. The shadows in the house dissipated, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted. It was over. The curse was broken. But even now, as I write this, I can't shake the feeling that something still lingers. The house is quieter now, the shadows less intrusive, but the locket's curse has left its mark. We've moved on, but the scars remain, a constant reminder that some family secrets are best left buried. If you ever come across an old family heirloom with a dark past, think twice before accepting it. Sometimes, the chains of the past are more than just history. They're a binding force that can reach out and touch the present in ways you'd never expect.